Welcome to Alternate Ending, where we're discovering good movies, one bad movie at a time. I'm your host, Tim Brayton, and this week we have a very special one-off episode. We're going to be talking with a guest who you might have heard before. A few months ago, I had Will Quade on to discuss the state of European art cinema, particularly in terms of the Cannes Film Festival. This was back in April of 2025, where he and I just kind of looked at the films that had been selected for this year's Cannes Film Festival and what that tells us about the state of art cinema in the world. And we're here to talk about European art cinema again, but this time in a slightly different focus with a slightly different film festival in the background, because we're actually here to talk about the Grand Jury Prize winner from the 2019 Venice Film Festival. That would be the second place prize. Those of you who, like me, don't have every single prize at Venice memorized, which we all should. And that film was An Officer and a Spy. And Will is actually a subject matter expert on this particular film. He has recently had an essay published in the International Journal of the Image titled We Accuse Antisemitism and Historical Remembrance in the Films of the Dreyfus Affair, where An Officer and a Spy, which is about the Dreyfus Affair, which we'll talk about if the phrase Dreyfus Affair doesn't mean it. Dreyfus or Dreyfus? It's Dreyfus, right?
Let's say Dreyfus. I don't know.
Okay, it's one of those two. But we're going to talk about that. But Will, that was his big case study in this paper, which kind of makes him the perfect person to discuss, because something that is happening in the world right now. So despite this winning a major prize at Venice, did not get distributed in the United States immediately. Looked like it wasn't going to get distributed in the United States at all, for the fairly straightforward reason that it was directed by Roman Polanski, who is, of course, persona non grata among American film distributors. And I know you and I have discussed this in the past, Will. The 2019 Venice really did feel like the people giving out the awards were sort of making a calculated fuck you to American critics, because this came in second place to Joker.
Yeah, the Lucretia Martel headed 2019 jury, lest we forget.
That's right. So we're here to talk a little bit, because something that has happened is that An Officer and a Spy has all of a sudden kind of emerged 6 years later into the United States, initially via a series of one-off screenings and like kind of specially promoted screenings, and we'll certainly talk about those. But then also, I believe it kind of got picked up by an actual, for real distributor.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it did. Yeah. And maybe that's the best place to begin, right? Yeah. I mean, it's long, winding journey to U.S. screens. You know, the French title of this is Accuse, which is, of course, the very famous document that novelist Emile Zola wrote libelously in the press, going after members of government. And the English title is An Officer and a Spy. It should be noted that it's based off a popular novel by Robert Harris, who wrote Conclave. This new distribution of An Officer and a Spy is really foregrounding his involvement rather than Roman Polanski's, for obvious reasons.
I simply cannot imagine what would possibly be behind that.
But yeah, the actual way it got here was that it originally was going to have a 2-week only showing at Film Forum in New York. And I'm not exactly sure how it got there. Film Forum is known for its, let's say, idiosyncratic programming choices. They had recently done screenings of The Pianist, which were met with, little fanfare. And An Officer and a Spy was there for 2 weeks, and no one's quite sure how it got there, what the distribution was, but it did so well they extended it for another week. And after that, it was picked up for distribution by Vitagraph. Interesting distributor. Picked up Aquarius by Cleber Mendonça Filho a while ago. Really good film. And ever since then, they've been doing kind of these weekend screenings. A screening here, a screening there. After the Film Forum thing, they had a weekend screening, one screening with a live Q&A with Robert Harris afterward. And you could ask him questions and all that. And it's right now, it's playing at Chicago Underground Film Festival. Chicago Underground Film Festival. This movie, very interesting, because anyone who's seen this film, and Tim, you would probably agree, this is very much Polanski on Good Behavior. This is very much a sober Oscar bait kind of movie, I would say.
This is for sure a prestige play and was received as such. I believe this actually won. It was for sure nominated for several César Awards.
Nominated for 12, yeah, and it won 3.
It won Best Adaptation, Best Costume Design, and Best Director, which feels like a very pointed thing for it to win.
Yes.
Although I know that was attended to by some controversy and members of the César board quit.
The whole board.
The whole board quit. Okay.
From what I remember, yes.
All right.
So, this film's in an interesting place that way, but the film's continuing to kind of paddle its way into U.S. screens. And I think it's interesting just to bring this up now because the things are somehow, even in 6 years, very different in the theatrical landscape and in the political landscape that have put this film here. And I just want to say, there are some very good podcasts that deal exactly with these implications. The Know Your Enemy podcast just did one over the kind of political implications in there. I know Film Comment's Jay Hoberman has written about these, the history of the film and what it's kind of done in its life, and its very notorious life after it was at Venice. Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting to me simply is how much their talk has not quite been about the film text itself. And I think there's, and Tim, you may agree or not agree, I think there's plenty here in this text worth delving into as much as everything surrounding it.
No, I mean, certainly everyone listening to this podcast is well aware. I am someone for whom the object itself is what I much prefer to talk about. Certainly I care more about the form and the structure of a film than the stuff going into its surroundings. And my perspective on that, at least, is that, well, 100 years from now, who's going to remember? But the object itself, I mean, 100 years, who can say, the state of cinema is tenuous. But in an optimistic world, 100 years from now, we will have the film, but we won't really care about what happened in 2019 through 2025. But I will say, I think we can't just completely ignore the context, because it's a fascinating journey for sure. And I will tell you that my immediate response, and I'm curious if you have any feelings about this, when I heard that it was playing in New York, it felt to me like, because it was a little while ago that it was playing there. I believe, was it July? Does that sound right?
It was in early August, the death days of movie theaters.
Right, so nothing playing, but it felt to me like it was in some capacity timed in a way that felt like a response to everything that's been going on discursively, shame on me for using that word, with Israel and Palestine, and that there was kind of an effort by Zionist groups to really push we still need to talk about anti-Semitism message, and it felt like this was maybe part of that to me.
I think that it's telling that this film, before it played at Film Forum, had I think one night only screening in 2024 at the UK Jewish Film Festival. And the reviews out of those from The Times and Unheard is kind of a privately funded, quote unquote, slow journalism think tank, but it obviously leans, a bit more to the right. And there's been very, kind of aggressive, recuperations of this movie from writers with those views. And I think what's telling about this film, and this is the main point I want to say about this film, which is that you can look at it as a Polanski apologia. You can look at its release now as in response to that. You can look at its suppression in 2019 as a response to a certain kind of political atmosphere as well. Maybe better, maybe not. All I'm saying is all of these readings are available in the film. And when you look at the film criticism, what strikes me the most about what's written about it is how different people's opinions are about the film. And what I'm saying is that the film's craft, the object itself, the only way that the film can be excused as like a worthy venture to make or watch is if the craft is so unimpeachably good, built to last 100 years, the definitive distillation of these events, that's the only way that the film can be valuable. And guess what? It is all of those things. This is the definitive Dreyfus Affair film. This is, in my opinion, one of the most definitive films in the filmography of Roman Polanski, if you want to read an auteurist reading of it as well.
Which certainly I think a lot of the critics who are now grappling with it finally, that it's kind of become an object in the world that you sort of have to talk about in America at least. That is certainly how people are defaulting to, is I think talking about it as an auteurist text by Polanski. Although I do think, and I mean, Polanski is a director who has always had a very heavy thumb on the scale, but it is not Polanski and Robert Harris's first collaboration. They did work together on The Ghost Rider in 2007, I believe. Does that sound right?
It's like 2009, 2010-ish, something like that. Yeah.
And I mean, certainly Robert Harris, who has been back kind of in the limelight because of the just extraordinary success of Conclave.
Yes.
And I feel like there are ways in which his voice is really clear in how this story is being told. But I think it is still, Polanski is not a director who lets his screenwriters be equal authors of the text. And so I think that's a fair thing to approach it from. Right.
And I think as well that, the film's release now, and this is the context I would say is, you read the review stateside, we look at it, but I just want to think for you, Tim, like, I love the Dreyfus Affair. I've been obsessed with the story since I was like in high school. Mm-hmm. This movie coming out was kind of a dream come true for me, that a highly produced film about the affair could still get made.
Sure.
But like for you, what was it like for you watching it? What was your familiarity? Did it matter? Like, how'd it go?
I mean, I cannot pretend that I am like a total neophyte about the Dreyfus Affair.
Yeah.
I would not call it as like a major obsession of mine, as it sounds like it has been for you. It's certainly something I knew about and found interesting and compelling, and an extremely, extremely important event in French history. So like I did care about a good version of the Dreyfus Affair, especially because, to me at least, the previous film version, and it's been filmed a few times, so I think we'll touch on that momentarily here. But the one that I knew best certainly was the 1937 Best Picture winner, The Life of Émile Zola. Émile Zola being a French novelist who, well, we talked about, Accuse and the letter. So it's half a biopic of Zola and then half a courtroom drama about the Dreyfus Affair. I find that movie quite turgid. I do not like it very much.
And yet very influential film.
Sure.
That's exactly the kind of film that keeps winning Oscars.
It is, and it's the first one of those that won an Oscar. So it really is a groundbreaking film. Unfortunately, the ground it broke was a haunted burial ground. But I will say, we've chatted a little bit about this. I don't want us to go too far without at least giving the penny tour of the Dreyfus Affair itself. So, since you're the expert and you wrote the paper, can you quickly walk us through both the affair and what has happened to it cinematically prior to this movie?
Right. Like, the reason why I asked you that question is because this movie almost assumes you're familiar with other movies about the affair. So, the Dreyfus Affair happened in late 19th century France. It was a decade and time that Tim and I are especially fond of and interested in which the French army discovered that there was a spy and a mole that was giving military secrets, and they convicted military officer Alfred Dreyfus to high treason and imprisoned him on a penal colony off the coast of South America called Devil's Island. So already very dramatic and very kind of capital R romantic. Through a series of kind of espionage, double, crosses, it is found out that the real mole is actually another person. And once the army finds out, they decide, instead of getting the real spy, that they're going to keep the other spy in prison. And when it's pushed against, and when these factors are pushed against, the reason why they say that Dreyfus has to be guilty is because he is Jewish. So all of a sudden, this affair becomes one in which it used to be kind of government espionage, and what was originally resulted as like palace intrigue all of a sudden gets all of these different connotations on it. What does it mean to be French? What does it mean to be in the army? What does it mean to be a traitor? Is it more patriotic to lie for the good of your country or tell the truth if it is unpopular about it? it becomes wrapped up in the modern press, in modern discourse, and it also becomes wrapped up in cinema. And George Méliès in 1899, literally as the second court-martial for Dreyfus is going on, a huge hullabaloo and enormous media event, Méliès films an 11-part serial that takes into account Dreyfus's imprisonment, his degradation ceremony, the second court-martial, and the assassination attempt against his lawyer. So even as cinema is being invented, the Dreyfus Affair is right there. And this is when France is really, Tim, you know that. This is when France is Hollywood. This is when France is the real film studio in the world, right? Or like they're leading the ship. And so after that, not much about the Dreyfus Affair until, lo and behold, the 1930s, right? There's a German film by Richard Oswald. There's a British film with Cedric Hardwicke, which is still under lock and key. I haven't seen it. The Richard Oswald film is the first Dreyfus film to make note that he's Jewish. Méliès never mentions it once. And you see over the course of these films, then Life of Emile Zola comes in. All of a sudden, the movie's not about Dreyfus, it's about the people around him trying to get him free, which is what An Officer and a Spy does. It becomes about everything else around it. Jose Ferrer made a film in the 50s called I Accuse that he directed. Screenplay by Gore Vidal. Very interesting film. And it was very much allegorical about the blacklist. So after the Holocaust, a Dreyfus Affair film comes out that has a little more connotations to it. And then in the 90s, Ken Russell makes a film for HBO about the Dreyfus Affair. Very interesting film, too, which is told from the point of view of Marie-Georges Picard, the anti-Semitic officer who ended up being very important in freeing Dreyfus, who ends up being the main character in this Polanski film. There's plenty of miniseries and plenty of French television films about the affair. But what's interesting about like these features is that they have to do so much in such little time. And that kind of becomes what's fun about tracking the films is like which dramatic events do they take from the affair and which ones do they leave out to kind of keep the story going. And An Officer and a Spy leaves out a tremendous amount from other depictions of it, which is why I think it kind of revises these things. And you may need to know a little bit about the affair, or at least movies about it, to kind of see why it's being made or what its urgency is, maybe.
Sure. And, you know, I'm curious because you've clearly seen a lot more of these than I have. You called this the definitive film, I believe is your word, about the Dreyfus Affair.
Right.
So I take it that means you think it's the best, although maybe you can't start here. Maybe you need to have a little bit of background in it. But what is definitive about it, do you think?
I think what's definitive about it is what's definitive about the affair in general. If you track those movies made, it takes until the Ferrer film in the 50s for them to even say the word out loud, Jewish. I mean, it's just that the 30s one is said once, right? And the Emile Zola, the Life of Emile Zola, all it is a word in a ledger they point to. They never say the word. And what's interesting is that the affair was also regarded as it's about the army and you shouldn't care about this. The real leftists don't care about the Dreyfus Affair because it's just bourgeois infighting and that kind of stuff. But all of a sudden, when the crux of the reason of the conspiracy to keep this person in prison and not admit failure on the part of the state becomes just because he is Jewish, all of a sudden it becomes about solidifying within the system that being Jewish is why he's a prisoner. And I think that's what An Officer and a Spy gets at 120 years after the Méliès film, which is this is about literally systemic racism. This is what it looks like. This is anti-Semitism is no longer this kind of dog whistle in the public square. It now can be used like it can be an interchangeable ideology that just covers up everybody's mistakes. And that's easier to do even than admit you're wrong. And I think it's very modern. And I think that's what An Officer and a Spy gets at is that, and that's one way it's definitive. There are many others, but I think it gets at the heart of the matter of the affair, which is that anti-Semitism was the last flag to cover up for all of this. But they will stand behind it and fight it until they die, literally. Mm-hmm. And I think it's I think the film gets at the urgency of that codification, I would say. Okay.
No, I think it certainly feels to me, well, I mean, again, my pool of comparisons is smaller. It feels like it knows what it wants to say in a way that
Yes.
The other versions I have seen do not. Like it's very clearly. I don't want to say it is a polemical film. I don't think it's true. It is certainly a film. Well, again, Roman Polanski is a director who has made multiple films that are very explicitly about he survived the Holocaust and has very profound feelings about that. And then he's made several films that are clearly haunted by that kind of suffering. So I think he could only ever make a film that is about the systematic anti-Semitism.
Yes, exactly.
And I'd be very curious. Have you read the novel?
Yes, I have a funny story about the novel, if you have 1 second.
Please.
I was obviously, like, I saw the Ghostwriter a while ago. I thought it was fun. I read the book, thought it was even more fun. I was on a trip to Europe after undergrad, spent like a month in Europe with my brother. I was in Heathrow ready to go home. What do I see? A new Robert Harris novel about the Dreyfus Affair. This is like May 2014 or something. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Read the whole thing on the flight. That's what Robert Harris novels are. They're elevated airport books. I mean that in a good way. And I just thought it was the perfect way of doing it. And then who else, Tim, and I think this is something you're getting at, who else could be better positioned to get at the political kind of modernization of hate than Roman Polanski? Mm-hmm. You know, as victimizer and victim. As somebody who has seen the Jewish question, as I say, historically enacted systematically, politically, and also industrially and culturally. And I just... That's the thing. His way in is actually much more kind of visible than simply does he kind of see himself in a character, which is kind of a shallow way to read what the film is.
Which he clearly does not, because certainly this is a film whose protagonist is Georges Picard.
Yes,
like,
yeah.
He has the arc. He is the character that Polanski is interested in trying to, like, unpack.
Yes.
It is most certainly not the film, quote-unquote, from the Jewish perspective, although it is certainly a film that I think had to be made by a Jewish filmmaker in order to capture a lot of the nuances in how these different forms of anti-Semitism are portrayed. But it's not like, at long last, Dreyfus tells his own version of the story. Like, that's clearly not what this is at all.
No. And I think that's a really astute insight. Maybe I should have even started there. But yeah, this film is not so tied to that parallel. If it were, then we'd have a scene of Dreyfus crying to Georges Picard saying, "Thank you for standing up for me, and I just never could have done it without you," which is how the Jose Ferrer movie ends.
Really? That's tacky as hell.
Every other Dreyfus film besides the Méliès film ends the same way, with him at the Legion of Honor ceremony accepting his ribbon and waving to Picard and his family and his brother, and that being the end. That scene is not in the end of this movie. For a very specific reason. I
really don't want to just go dancing into spoiler territory for a film that I think very few people listening to this will have seen. But I think how this film emphatically chooses not to end that way.
Yes, yes.
It's part of what I think a Jewish filmmaker had to make it. And certainly a filmmaker who has in the past, and I'm chiefly thinking of a thing like Chinatown here, or even really The Pianist, when given the opportunity, Polanski will take the path of making an ending either things have gone as badly as they possibly could, and then you get Chinatown, or everything is quote-unquote happy, like things resolved, but the characters are never going to recover from the events of the story, which is The Pianist. And I think it would suffice to say, as a Jew, Polanski realizes anti-Semitism did not end with the Dreyfus Affair, and indeed did not end in the heart of Georges Picard because of the Dreyfus Affair. This is not Gentleman's Agreement.
No.
This is not the Gentile learns more about what it's like to suffer as a Jew and then comes out better for it. That is certainly not what this movie is.
No, and I think that's a really good point, because that's what I mean. It's pushing back against not only the other movies about the affair, but like the lessons we took from it. Like the idea that this was a amazing victory for human rights. I mean, you could spin it that way, but materially, politically, those were never really the stakes. Obviously, it takes on those connotations. But this is what I mean, like Polanski's perspective again, and this is, I do need to get into the ending with you because the very last line of the movie is the last line of the book.
Okay.
And, Picard, the very last thing he says, Dreyfus can't get his promotion. It's just too political. Like, we can't open it back up again. Sorry. And then Picard finally says apologies for my place in the affair. And says, like, if it wasn't for you, Alfred Dreyfus, like, doesn't say my name, but if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here in my new job. And Dreyfus says, no, you're here because you did your duty. And there's a way to read that, and there's a way to read that which I think is superficial, which is like, yeah, he did his duty. Like, he stood up for justice and truth, and that's what we should all do. We should be standing up and for justice and truth. But I'm telling you, Tim, you look at that line. What does it really mean, dude? I look at it like you're not here because of me at all. You didn't care that I was Jewish. You didn't care. You don't care about me, Alfred Dreyfus. You're here because your duties to the army. You're here because you thought, oh, they're breaking the army code by lying about it, and I need to get this guy out. I'm not saying Picard didn't do heroic things. He risked his life. But this ending gets like, this isn't the Jose Ferrer film or the Ken Russell film where Picard and Dreyfus are just like yucking it up and just crying with joy. Like, they don't need each other at the end.
Right.
And Dreyfus doesn't owe thanks to Picard for anything. And I think Picard, that is the realization here. It was a stalemate at the end of the day. Like, it was getting just a little bit back. And that's why Polanski's perspective is so crucial in this compared to the ones movies made closer to the affair, in my opinion.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, as a filmmaker, Polanski does not romanticize things, and certainly as, again, someone who is clearly just defined in some ways by the Holocaust as a human being, he is not someone who is going to, again, romantically suggest that the Dreyfus Affair solved anything. It didn't. If it had solved anything, then the events of the 1940s would not have happened.
Yes.
I think it's in some way the subtext of this movie.
Yeah, and some could say that's overly cynical, right? Because one thing that, I mean, the film doesn't get into the whole, political war in France, and, I think that that's a good thing for the film. I don't think it needs political speeches and, like, what are the papers saying. The main criticism of the film already is that it's dry and boring. The only way to make it even more boring is to have political speeches in it. But I do think that the movie gets at that, there were riots in the streets goaded up by anti-Semitism. And another thing I think this movie, again, the definitive telling is that even Gentile allies will be subject to the full extent of the state's wrath if they go against it. And I think that's an interesting point to make, regardless on if you have the right amount of antipathy for the people deemed unworthy, which he did. Didn't matter. And I think, again, that's a modern thing. Yeah. If you cross the state rather than cross the your honor, you will be punished.
Sure.
I don't know.
No, I think that's a really great way to read it. But anyway, to return to the question that I asked a little while ago. So you did read the book, and I'm curious, and it sounds like the answer is some, if they end up the same point. How much of this is in the book, and how much of this is what the movie is, like, imposing upon the book?
Yeah, the book, what I love about the book is that it's the whole story. And as much as the story can be without getting into, the political parties and everything, which are mentioned in some way, but there's, much of Picard's tradecraft is missing from the film. That's what I love about the book, is that there's really good spy stuff, and, like, seeing how spies would have gotten information and things in the 1890s, and, like, his routines of how to pick up stuff and remain secretive. And I just love spy shit, right? Like, I think it's fun. I find that tradecraft and expertise very compelling. And you don't get the sense that Picard is an expert in espionage or an expert or adapter in tradecraft. And I would like, for me, like, he feels almost more like the Ghost Rider or in Conclave, where he's kind of just stumbling onto these things. And, he has this deep conviction inside he didn't even know was there, but I think Picard was more active in real life and in the book than in the movie.
Okay.
But I think it's tough in a movie to do that when he is ping-ponging between so many people.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
And that gets to something that I think if we can move beyond talking about the movie as a story, because as you know, as people know, I like thinking about movies as sort of objects, and especially I think Roman Polanski movies, because he's such a ferociously good crafter of those objects, whatever else is true about him as
truly
an artist and a human. The two things, so I did not rewatch this movie, in part because I wanted to kind of avoid having too many things. I didn't want just to turn into like a litany of, I want to talk about this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
So I can say that my memories of having watched it a few months ago, and this was before it was being distributed, so I actually have to thank you for helping me find it. The two things that really lingered for me as crucial, one is the way that it uses, not even uses color, one it's the way it shoots color, like the way it actually renders color on screen. But the other one is the pacing and structure.
Mm-hmm.
And what's fascinating about this movie, I think, is that I would say by the time it is done, and this is why I find it remarkable that one of the criticisms is that it's dry. I think it's a very, like, nail-biting thriller in a way that, yes, this is the writer of The Ghost Rider. Yes, this is the writer of Conclave, which Conclave is, I think, a pretty dumb movie, but it sure is watchable. I'll say that watchable. For Conclave.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that, like as you said, elevated airplane read, elevated beach reads is sort of where its mode is. So I think it gets to some place that's very exciting, intense, and fraught, and certainly Polanski's goading that along above and beyond what the script is doing. But it also, prior to that point, spends such an enormous length of time, like fully a third, if not even a half of its running time, just kind of watching as nothing moves forward in a way that I think replicates like our sense of projects and in difficult investigations, where like it's a whole bunch of nothing. I figure out one thing and all of a sudden everything happens all at once. And so it's actually it's kind of the Godfather structure where like the first chunk of it covers a very short amount of time where nothing happens. The middle chunk is kind of normal movie pacing. And then by the end, it's like adjacent scenes are separated by many weeks or even months from each other.
I know, it's in single cuts too. I mean, I just, it's so interesting you say that. It reminded me of watching Z, you know, because I feel like Z is a really great example of the European art film kind of playbook, which is make the first hour like as boring as possible, and then the second hour will like grab you so much you'll be thinking about everything you were watching and replay. It's very satisfying. And I think you're right, and I think what you say is indicative in the music in the movie, which is a very understated Alexandre Desplat score.
Which how often do we get those? But
I know we don't, and I think that what's interesting is the music kind of has this like big thumbing drum to it, and it starts with like a bomb, bomb, bomb. 3 minutes into the suite, it's bomb, 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 and then at the end it's bomb, 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 bomb. That's what the movie is. It's that cycle. It's all intentional. From the script to the cutting to the music, it's meant to feel that way. Absolutely. And you're meant to feel like you're getting sucked up in everything, and all of a sudden there's so many things going on, and people that it's meant to feel like how you feel in that way. And I think I think you're just dead on. I think that's absolutely in the program and method of the film.
Because I think that's one of the things that forces us to identify with Picard in this film, because he's the one who, like, obviously Dreyfus's experience of these events is not going to be boredom. It's going to be a constant existential dread.
Yes.
Picard is the one whose experience is going to be, initially, I'm frustrated because nothing's going anywhere and I'm unsatisfied. And then he starts to get more and more, he progresses further and further, and then all of a sudden he starts to like have to deal with things as like it's snowballing. So I do think we are experiencing the story very specifically the way he does sensorially, in a way, in terms of like that sense of momentum building. So it's not just he's the protagonist because he's in most of the scenes, which is true. But he's the protagonist because we're sort of, our sensation of time is his sensation of time.
Exactly. And I think that's what because Polanski has a few first person movies like this. And I think that's what he gets so well is you really start to embody the head of the character. And I at least like I did get to that kind of Polanski paranoia you usually get in this movie.
You
I
for
did.
Sure do. There's a specific shot I recall. It's close to the end where we see someone emerge into the very deep background of a wide, I think it's like a I actually don't know what lens it's on. I'd have to rewatch it. So I guess I should have. But it's a shot where he's really just using the absolute most possible depth that this lens and this camera setup can give him. So we see a character who's like dozens, maybe literally hundreds of yards away.
Yeah.
And the film refuses to draw your attention to him in a way that somehow makes you very aware that he is there.
Yes.
And that awareness that, like, we sort of see him because there's not much else to look at in this frame other than this guy really far away that the characters don't seem to have noticed. And that triggers that response of, like, oh no, something horrible is going to happen. And it does. And I feel like that's such a quintessential Polanski moment to me. That is the same director who realizes that if he frames Rosemary, or he frames whoever's having the phone call, Rosemary's Baby, a little bit inside the doorway, we are going to lean in to see it. Like this is that filmmaker, the one who's like, I will manipulate your awareness of what you're not seeing or how you're not seeing something in a conventional way.
And I think that's what's we have been burying the lead, which is that An Officer and a Spy is a movie of peerless craft. Absolutely. I'm talking awe-inspiring, gasp-inducing uses of the frame.
It is
things that you have not seen outside of a Renoir film.
Yeah, it is for sure his best built film since The Pianist, if not even further back. But yeah, the images, it's not like that sort of easy, I'm going to have my European period piece look like paintings, which, I mean, I'm not dissing that. One of my all-time favorite movies is Barry Lyndon, which that's basically its solitary artistic program is to do that. But it's not that, but at the same time, there is like a very clear pictorial sense to how shots are set up, and I'm thinking both of the one I just described, but also this repeating motif of shots of the inside of Picard's office with someone like standing at the doorway looking in, and sometimes it's Picard looking in at his own office, sometimes it's someone looking in his office at him.
Right.
And we see that image probably not that many times, but it feels like a defining image to me. Like it just dominates the movie. And it's so perfectly built to like both emphasize the going inside the office, but also that we aren't there and maybe we aren't meant to be there.
Right. It's never home. It's never his office. I think that this is what I'm saying. Polanski is an old school filmmaker, so he believes every shot must have a question that needs to be answered. Or every shot is answering a question.
Yes.
So every time you see Picard in his office, it is meant to answer a question of why is he not comfortable, but he's here. And you see it in how people look at him, the dust everywhere, as if this office has just never been used. He's in a useless position even, someone who's not meant to rock the boat. Everything is part of it. I think of, the scene where he goes to pick up spy files in Notre Dame. It is Notre Dame, I think, the big church. And it's even the church has spies in it. The clergyman turns a blind eye, walks right back into confession. Yep. This is the kind of, attention to detail and paranoia or just shot answering questions or allowing the shot to have a question worth answering that makes the film such a pleasurable watch aesthetically.
Yeah. No, it's very, again, you mentioned before, this is him on his good boy behavior. And for him, good boy behavior in part means it has to be very impeccable. And I think it is. I think it is very much like you're saying. Every shot functions. Yes. This is not... the frames are beautiful because he is trying very hard to make them beautiful. And the film's cinematographer, Pavel Eidelman, who is a very, very wonderful Polish cinematographer.
Did The Pianist, I think.
I think did several. Did The Pianist, did Oliver Twist, and did The Ghost Rider.
That movie looks...
Actually has done... Also did Carnage, also did Venus and Fur. So they've been working together for a while.
Man, Oliver Twist is a great looking movie.
I have actually not seen Oliver Twist. It's the only 21st century Polanski film I haven't seen.
It's, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen it because I didn't want to. But yeah, so the film looks every frame of painting-ish, but it's not that every frame of painting sort of filmmaking craft that I find suffocating right now in modern indie cinema. In that every frame is a component of an argument, and not necessarily an argument about anti-Semitism, but an argument about like, here is the experience you should feel. Right.
And I you know, Charles Taylor wrote a very good article in Liberties about this film and kind of late style Polanski, but something he has said is that, you know, yes, the film has enormously beautiful production values. Yes, everyone's framed beautifully in it, but none of the production values take away from the narrative. It's not like you are paying attention to the decorative chandelier work rather than what Picard is doing in the scene. And I do think that even every extreme wide shot is meant to have you kind of take into account what the character would feel about the space, rather than you should be looking at just the space. And that is, I know that's kind of a subtle distinction, but it's just part of watching the film. This is what criticism is. It's like trying to figure out what's different about this compared to other things like it. And it never feels like you're losing the plot. I know that's a funny way of putting it for a movie that has so much to cut, but it feels like every scene is progressing something. And I don't get that in literally any movie anymore. No movie is moving like that anymore.
And I think that's what makes this feel so bracing, is that it is very old-fashioned. But it's old-fashioned in the sense that we used to make movies properly. But no, like it does have that, like, it's disciplined, you know, maybe even more so than it's old-fashioned. It's disciplined.
That's yes.
And potentially, you know, the discipline leads to it being, as you mentioned, maybe in some ways annoying, because stuff that was cool and stuff that was fun in the book, or stuff that was, you know, useful to know in the historical document, isn't here because it is trying to be very lean.
Yeah, I you're right, and maybe it's too lean. I don't know, like maybe it is, but I have to say, 132 minutes, it is a brisk 132.
I was literally gonna say, I mean, that's the devil's running time. That window between 130 and 140 is the single worst window of time for a movie to land. I did not feel this movie's length.
No.
At whatsoever.
No. And I think another thing I do want to mention is that this is a towering performance from Jean Dujardin.
It is.
As Picard. I should mention that. He makes it look very easy, doesn't he? I mean, he has to carry every scene in the movie almost. And to do so with this giant mustache that obscures so much of your face, you have to do so much acting with your eyes, you know? And I feel like he is just absolutely perfect in this film.
I agree, and like, I am not someone who instinctively dislikes Dujardin, but I will say, you look at the films that I think he sort of becomes especially well known for. Certainly in the United States, it's The Artist, the fake silent movie. But I mean, he is. I mean, I guess it's actually a silent movie, but you know what I mean. Yeah. He is someone who primarily makes pretty loosey-goosey broad comedies. I think after The Artist, what I knew him best for was the OSS 117 series, where he's basically playing, I believe the books were more like legitimately just French James Bond, but the films are parody of James Bond. And
they really leaned into him.
And still doing so. His next film after Officer and a Spy was OSS 117-4. So, or maybe that's 3, I forget. So like, he is a comic actor.
Right, he is.
And he's not bad at it, so I don't want to say that, like, oh, he's gross, he's jokes. But, like, I was not expecting the level of quiet that this performance has. It is not anxious that we interpret it. It's just kind of letting us see how he's behaving and kind of giving us space to read.
Right.
But not in a way that's lazy. Like, in a way that's very true to both who Picard is as someone who's not going to be constantly grandstanding, but also part of this overall project where the movie wants you to work with it. The movie wants you to watch it. It's not just, and this is why I think it's very different from something like Conclave, which just shovels its ideas in your mouth like a baby bird. You have got to come to Officer and a Spy ready to interpret it.
You have to watch it.
You have to watch it.
You do. And I think that's not normal in the movie theater these days. I think also you have to read fast. It's like an Oscar for Hardy film. You better be prepared to read.
A lot of talking in this French movie. A lot of talking.
And I think it's because Robert Harris said, and there had been rumors, like, this was going to be an English language film for like a long time. And Harris said that it was like came really close to Brad Pitt doing it. And it was going to be Pitt as Picard. I'm sorry, but like that's terrible. I can't imagine that.
The version of this that's just Conclave, but about the Dreyfus Affair, I'm sure I would find very watchable. But
right, yeah, very watchable.
In the same way that even though I don't think it's good, remember that All Quiet on the Western Front from a couple years ago?
I remember it. Yeah,
it feels like it came out a billion years ago, but it's only like 3 years old. That is a movie that, for all its serious wants as a work of art, I'm glad that there is a major prestigious adaptation of that book in German.
Totally. There should be.
And I'm glad that there is a major prestigious, internationally significant art film that won lots of awards on the Dreyfus Affair in French.
And it's French. Yeah. Not a guarantee. I mean, we haven't had many in French, and I think you're just exactly right. It's another reason why it's the definitive Dreyfus film. Yeah. It needs to be in French. It makes the research easier too. I mean, that's what this film really is. It's following papers and documents and stuff, and having to say French names and Britishized English. I don't want to watch that. No. You know what I mean? And I don't know. This was the way it needed to be. In a weird way, again, the poison pill of Polanski, right? Like, he doesn't get Pitt in the American money because he's radioactive even before all this goes down. He somehow makes it in France. It's better because of it. Mm-hmm. It's a career best performance from somebody who's already won an Oscar as well. It's just like it's just a movie that keeps giving and taking and being out and not. And I just have no idea where the next step in this is going to go.
Yeah. I'd like to return to something, though, because we kind of breezed on it because there's just a lot to talk about, and certainly we'll return to that as well. But, you mentioned it's a very handsomely built movie, like beautiful sets, beautiful costumes. But it does not do the period drama thing where you are meant to say things like, what beautiful sets, what beautiful costumes. and that gets back to something I said a while ago, which is after the pacing, and after, I guess, that one shot of the, like, way deep guy coming up the garden path, the thing that really wedged in my mind most was the very peculiar way that color is rendered, and I think it has to have been some digital tinkering. I don't know if you can get it in, like, out of the camera this way.
Yeah.
But it's like...
I don't know.
Go ahead.
No, how would you describe it?
I've been trying for several months now to describe it. It's very saturated, but it's not bright. Like the colors are. You look at the colors like that's blue. It's not like that's a very bluish shade of gray compared to a very reddish shade of gray. It's like that's real blue, that's real red, but it's not like Technicolor. Like they're all very dark colors. It's very muted.
Yes, it's muted but vibrant. Mm. I know those words don't compute. I don't know another way to say it, though.
That's what's so hard to describe the way it looks, because like it does have that lushness we think of when we think of like an Oscar bait period film, but it's not visually sumptuous, right? It's not like an opulent movie to look at. You're not going to be like dazzled by all the pretty colors.
No, it's an interiors film.
And it's almost like the fact that you're not dazzled becomes more salient than the colors themselves in a way. Like you're kind of aware, at least I was kind of aware, of not feeling like this was a beautiful, lush production.
Yeah. Yeah, I think...
Go ahead.
No. I think like the fact that like the reds on their uniforms are like slightly like matted,
Yeah.
or that the golds on their uniforms have aged ever so slightly to yellow. And those are the things that are standing out as far as saturated,
Yeah.
as in like those details are there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe like the digital tinkering is just kind of showing really, really kind of profoundly the level of actual detail in the craft of the
Mm-hmm.
physical costumes, of the sets, of the
Yeah.
carriages. And I think that the people, I think again, like not supposed to be like, what beautiful shots, what beautiful costumes, because that's our perspective now.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to think like them in the film. They're not going around thinking
Yeah.
I am in such an opulent headquarters or
Exactly.
anything like that. And again, that's because there is like it's trying to be real. It's trying to be so real to the
It's
events,
trying to be
right?
real to the events, but it even kind of goes beyond that because I think there's just something about it that's like denying us a form of satisfaction that we expect to get from this kind of filmmaking.
He would never do that. Not
Of
anything
course.
Roman Polanski would ever do.
And this is what I'm saying. Like the whole film, in a way, is about being denied satisfaction. Like
Yes,
the
yes.
pacing is about that. Certainly, that last scene, which just does not make it possible to walk out of this and feel like you learned a lesson.
No, no.
And again,
You're exactly
you
right.
use the word cynical. He is a cynical filmmaker. I mean,
He
and maybe that's
is.
disappointing, maybe that's not, but he is such a cynical filmmaker.
And I think that cynicism has its place.
Yeah.
Like I find the cynicism in like Robert Zemeckis is here to be demoralizing and sad. I find Polanski's cynicism to be politically astute even.
I
That to see this way I think does have real teeth to it.
I feel like in a way cynicism is the theme of this because he is saying a version of this story that is not cynical would be a lie. And
Yes.
so I'm going to make you feel very unresolved and like you don't quite know what you were supposed to do with any of this because if I gave you anything more comfortably packaged, I would be lying to you.
Right. And I think that to me is the biggest takeaway, which is, I'm seeing things like we skip over time and scenes and we don't see him get pardoned and we don't have the Legion of Honor ceremony and we don't get this, we don't get that. And it's like, yes, that's the program of the
Yeah.
film. You're correct. That is what the film is about. It's about how none of it actually coalesced into anything tangibly, meaningfully progressive in the long term.
Yeah.
That is the point of the film. Can you disagree? That is what I would say.
So-
Who really can?
So I'm curious, and I want to preface this a couple different ways. One is by saying you said something at the start that we haven't followed up on, but I think is really important to reiterate. That this is a movie that has opened itself up to many readings.
Yes.
And those readings can certainly be, as I think a lot of American critics have decided will be the easiest path through this very difficult movie. This is Roman Polanski talking about how he thinks he's been unfairly judged. And
Sure.
I don't think that's not true. I don't think that's
Right.
an interesting way to watch this movie. But I think
Right.
that is a true statement that he
I
feels like he hasn't gotten his fair chance.
I mean, he's in the movie.
He's in the movie.
Literally.
He
Like
is
he has
literally
a
in the movie.
cameo in the film. He's putting himself in the film.
Yep.
That reading is available to you. I'm not going to say it's not.
But so there's lots of readings, and it reminds me of something that's really stuck in my craw since last year, actually, last Oscar season. Mike D'Angelo, film critic, who at one point wrote for this website, and we were not able to make that happen in long term, but it was still very pleasant to have him with us. Said something on his Substack, or not his Substack, his Patreon, that I forget which of the like big highly feted Oscar movies last year that I didn't like and he didn't like this was. But he said something that I had a really hard time articulating, and I'm paraphrasing here. The reason I have such a hard time liking critically acclaimed movies is that I like movies that ask questions. And
Yes.
recently critics have decided they want movies that give you answers.
Right.
And I think what is fantastic about Officer, and this is now me, what's fantastic about Officer and a Spy is that it is a film just spewing questions out, and you really have to be an active participant in getting any sort of meaning out of this movie, even at a narrative level, I think.
Yes.
And I love that it does do that, just complete opening up of how do you want to read this film because you can. Like it
Right.
becomes an exercise for the viewer. And I'm curious
Yeah.
what you sort of see as being, you mentioned there's lots of ways to read this, but like, what do you think that means?
What I think that's a really good question. I think it's actually the question, which is why is this film, which as a text when you watch it, pretty objective, definitive version of these events, right? Why does it have all of these different things going on, all these different reviews, right? I would say that I think the movie's craft, and I just always want to come back to its craft, its execution, is so ironclad that there are people who believe and I don't even think this is just what I think, but I think there are people who are trying to say the craft is excusing this horrific kind of parallel. And what I'm saying is the craft is actually responsible for a multiplicity of readings rather than diminishing
The
them.
craft is why you have to grapple with it.
Exactly. And that's to me is what art should do. I just have a belief that art's like the what art should do is have the ability to provoke questions no matter the time, right? There was another movie, this is 2025, and I don't know when this is coming out. There's a grand jury prize winner this year that has also not picked up American distribution. That movie's The Voice of Hand Rajab. Am I going to have to wait 6 years to see that? See, these are the questions that come even from its distribution. And when we get to the actual film, we see that this film is undeniable in its craft, which means that it is better probably or more conducive to open things up and disentangling all of the ideas in it or that people bring to it rather than cordon it off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this film is deeply troubling. And I mean that in a way that, like, I'm not, no one has a clear conscience watching the film. And no one has a clear conscience in this movie either. And even Dreyfus, who does, you may not like him. He doesn't come off very good in this film. It doesn't even let you have that. So I think the movie, like, antagonizes people. And I think that it makes people really have to think about what they think about the art, what their convictions about cinema are, and where they're going to go with them in the future. And I think those are important questions we all need to ask ourselves.
That feels like an extremely potent. That is your final thought. But do you have a final thought, or was that kind of it?
I know that the main question is like, how are we going to see the movie? Should we see the movie? I'll just say the film is out there and available. Make of that what you will.
Yeah, no.
So,
I will say the movie is now no longer contraband, which is basically
right.
how you and I saw it.
Right.
And it does. It does raise lots of questions, and I get that people grapple with those questions, and that's, again, grappling with questions is what this movie is doing, so I am certainly not going to say rush right out and see it, although...
Right, no. No.
I treasure when movies like this come across my radar because there just aren't enough of them. So, like,
No.
I have no regrets about having seen this film. It's a tough, big movie from a very talented person who has a lot of darkness, and I think if he didn't have that darkness, he wouldn't be the filmmaker he is, and that's, again, what you want to do with that is what you want to do with that. But.
Right. Is it still a valuable exploration of the human condition? I would say yes. That would just be that's what I believe, and I think you should see the film for yourself and think of that and come to your own conclusion. Because you will with this film, one way or the other.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for proposing this topic, Will. Thank you for coming back to the website. We'll hopefully be able to have you back again sometime soon. Before I let you go, is there any place online in the world that folks can read more of your stuff? I know that you have had other academic publishing happening recently. Do you want to plug any of that, or do you just want it to go away?
I'm on Letterboxd, Will_Q. My profile picture is Squidward. I think that image says more than I ever could about my general temperament on there, but I just love seeing people grapple with movies like this, and I'm looking at everyone's reviews on this movie, and it's been really fun and interesting, so I'll still be on there.
Well, thank you so much, Will, for joining us. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with a regular alternate ending podcast. I'll be joined by several members of the alternate ending community, where we're going to discuss the 75th anniversary of some extremely important American classic movies. So you're going to want to be sure to check that out. We'll talk to you then.